Hi, I'm Erinn Maxwell, author of Fate and Fortune and of Heather and Thistle. I write stories that look like they're about romance, history, and hidden treasure, but they're really about what happens when you realize you don't have to stay the same person you've always been. And that's usually where things start to get interesting.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Erinn Maxwell. She's returning to the podcast to talk about her new book of Fate and Fortune. And we're going to explore so many topics today. Yes, this is a beautiful romance, but we're also talking about legacy, cycle breaking, and the non-linear journey of healing, especially when we go from survival to genuine thriving. One of my favorite lines from the entire book is, "What cannot be buried must be carried." And we're going to talk about that and how it applies not just to gold, but to grief, to family stories, and the parts of ourselves that we can no longer pretend aren't there. Erinn, welcome back to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here too.
So, as we closed our last episode where we talked about your book, I think you and I were just checking in with each other, right, after the recording, and I was telling you just how much the book meant to me, and I was so glad we'd had the conversation about it. And since that episode aired, I got so much feedback from listeners and other authors who've been on the podcast who listened to the episode because your book and your conversation touched on so many important topics. And then you walloped me with another book. And that is what we are here to talk about today because you are not done with us in this journey. And I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we get to talk about this book today. So, before we even dive in, I just want to give you the floor to tell us the name of this book and a little bit of the story behind it.
Sure, yeah. This is the sequel to Of Heather and Thistle, my first novel. It's called Of Fate and Fortune. It's a dual timeline story set in Scotland that picks up where the first booklet leaves off. It weaves together history and mystery and romance. And on the surface, it's a treasure hunt tied to the Jacobite gold. But at its core, it's really about legacy and healing and what we inherit, what we question, and what we ultimately choose to do with it.
So I'm kind of laughing to myself because I'm thinking about all the notes I have about this, which I bombarded you with before we hit record. But to anyone listening right now, I had about 5 bullet points just about the preface, which was only about a page and a half of her book. So we're going to do our best to touch on all of these topics and be really nice to ourselves because just like we did the last time, we're going to do really a deep emotional dive. Yes, we're talking about this book, but we're talking about the deeper themes in the book. And one of the things that really stood out to me as I opened this book and I began reading, and I'm reading the author's note and preface, is you reminding the reader that healing, it doesn't plateau. It's almost like there's different layers to the onion. You can keep peeling back. And that almost like this is the book we get to see not just what survival looks like, but what thriving looks like. And that's a journey in and of itself. So I want to ask you, did you know that you were going to write this book when you wrote your first book? Or when did this idea come up for you?
So the first book of Heather and Thistle, I wrote it years ago. I wrote it a long time ago. I started looking back at it and refining and adding more to it. And then I think it was a couple of months before release, I was like, I could expand on this. I could expand on it. It originally was supposed to end and then that'd be it. Cause I don't know if you remember the last time we spoke, I said I didn't have any plans for this book. It's just something that I did, the first one. It was just something that I did, something that I wrote, and I just planned on sitting on it for a while. But a few months before release, I started writing this one and continuing the story. And it has been such a joy. It has been such a joy. This one, obviously, I love Of Heather and Thistle. It's my very first novel. But there's something about this one where I really feel like I've refined my craft. I have come to know myself better. I've come to know the characters better. And there are some new friends in the story too that I just think are the dual. It's a dual timeline story, and the historical timeline has my heart. It's one of my favorite things I've ever written. So it's a fun journey, and I'm so glad we're here.
Oh, and I want to just touch on that, what you just ended on, the story within the story, right? That you're sharing with us, because the characters in the story are really doing an exploration of the past, and they're really doing a deep dive, and it's taking them on sort of a physical, mental, emotional journey. And we're uncovering secrets about ourselves, about other people. And I want to know why that was so important for you, sort of that dual timeline, and what do you think it brought to the story?
I think that it was important for me to explore the relationship of Heather's ancestors. You know, because Heather herself she's very layered. She's very formed by the environment that she grew up with. And I think that it's always exciting in literature and in books to like really deep like figure out why people are the way they are. And there's no Heather without Harris and Fiona, which are her ancestors from the 18th century in Scotland, who are behind the whole Jacobite gold plot. And it's really interesting because the romances in both timelines, they're about partnership, but it's really about two different kinds of love. There's love that's chosen in safety, Heather and Flynn's, and then one that's really chosen in survival and necessity. And it was really fun to be able to explore the two, seeing how both kind of form the intense love story that we've come to know. And it's one of my favorite parts of the story is the contrast between the two. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. Heather and Flynn's relationship shows what love looks like. So when you have the space and the safety to choose each other freely, and it's a choice at the end of the day, there's no external force keeping them together. It's a conscious, ongoing decision and choice that they make daily. But with Fiona and Harris, Heather's ancestors, it's the opposite. Their love is shaped by pressure and danger and politics and survival, and they don't get the luxury of ease ever. So they have to choose each other in the middle of uncertainty and risk and danger constantly. And that was a really fun dichotomy to explore.
So many threads to pull on. What do I start with? So let's just touch on something that really stood out to me, I guess, in my own personal journey, but also when I practiced as a psychotherapist or a group leader, I would always encourage those personal stories, the ones handed down through our family, the ones we've been telling ourselves, and bringing consciousness to them, right? Because sometimes they can just be so automatic. This was like this happened because of this. But what happens when we actually unpack it and look at it? And that was very present in this story, where it can be so revealing. Maybe I didn't have all the information, or maybe someone was an unreliable narrator, or maybe there was something deeper. And then there's this other theme in this book about legacy. And I love the idea of having a conversation about this for a few reasons, because some of our legacies can feel like burdens, some of them can feel like miracles. And for the people in this book, we're getting to see what that is, right? And I would love to highlight what Flynn, our main male character, reveals at some point in the book. It's not like a huge, yeah, I'm not giving away a spoiler, but he's really talking about a point in his life where he made a choice for himself, almost stepping away from what was expected of him. And just that topic, right? That theme. Why is that so important to talk about in books when we are the cycle breaker, the chain breaker, when we're the one who doesn't do maybe what's prescribed for us?
Yeah, that's a really tough spot to be in. And with Flynn, he comes from a long line of men in his family that do just one thing and one thing only. And he decided that that wasn't the life for him. That's not his skill set. That's not what he wants to be doing with his life. And unfortunately, in that choice to choose something different for himself, in that choice to want more out of his life than what was prescribed to him, he unfortunately is left out of his family. He's seen as somebody who betrayed the family business, who whose value and whose worth is no longer, valid. And so in book number one, we really are focusing on Heather and her journey and how Flynn supports it. But I really love that in book two, we're seeing more about Flynn and more about why he is the way he is. Why is he such a ray of sunshine for Heather? Why is he so ready to support her in everything she does, even when sometimes we want to shake Heather and be like, get it together. We want to know, it's his patience and his love for her is so sweet. And it's sometimes challenging to want to wonder why he can be so patient with her, because I know me writing her, and I'm sure listeners and readers who have, heard her, she was an unreliable narrator at times, and she was not a healed version of herself. And it's very challenging to be in somebody's corner who has a lot of the self-sabotage characteristics. So Flynn was really, really fun in this story, in seeing why he is the way he is, and the choices he made and how they shaped who he is today.
Oh, I love what you just said about being in someone's corner. And I'll not give too many details, but I had a conversation with someone in my life where I said, I'm always on your side. I'm always in your corner, but it's a really lonely place to be because you're not even there. And it's really hard to be the only one in your corner. Like, I need you there as well. I can't take all that space. And so it's really interesting in this story as we see that gradually happen, right? It doesn't happen overnight. We're all flawed human beings, and some of us were raised to not be in our own corner. And then we have someone walk into our life who is grounding and supportive and really sees us, and we might want to run away from that because that's really scary and we don't know how to deal with that. So it's so beautiful to read this story and to continue to like dive into the deeper and deeper layers of the relationships because they had a happily ever after at the end. But this is what happens in the happily ever after. Your relationship, you keep meeting each other over and over and over again if you're lucky. I mean, that's a beautiful part of relationships. And I thought it was really interesting as I was reading this because, right, we're hearing about Flynn making a choice for his life, and it's not a bad thing. And even that can disrupt an entire family, right? And then you think about sort of the topic of cycle breakers in families, whether there was abuse or something else going on and someone decides to step out of it to do something different and they're seen as almost like the black sheep. Like, that's the other end of the spectrum. This guy just wanted to do something different with his profession, and that's enough to kind of shake everything up. So I loved getting to learn about him this way and how he had to establish that foundation within himself. And so he was able to provide that for someone else. Like, it didn't come out of thin air, and we got his backstory, and it was great. I would love to touch on something you've shown us in these two books about what it's like to experience a relationship that is grounding versus escalating. Like, it's not an incendiary relationship. And I mean that with regard to life challenges. Like, yeah, they have sparks, there's no doubt. But I'm saying, like, when things are really complicated in our lives, to have someone you can navigate them with versus, oh, I trust this person to make it worse. Why was that important to write about this in two books back to back?
I think that it's not very common to read about healthy relationships. And unfortunately, it's not super common to come across them in real life, especially in your young adulthood. I thought that it was really important to have an example of something that young women and also young men could aim for, and to see that this is how things should be. You should have a partner who meets you where you at, but doesn't want to leave you there, who wants to help you become a better, more healthy version of yourself. And you want to grow with somebody. You want to be there for them. You want them to be there for you. And that's not always easy. But knowing that it's a conscious choice. It's a choice that you make every single day to love somebody. It's not always this beautiful honeymoon fairy tale feeling like in the beginning of relationships. When things get hard, that's when relationships are tested. Maybe not just in romantic relationships, but also friendships. Things are easy breezy beautiful when things are going great, You can be for somebody in the easy times super quick, but it's really hard to be in somebody's corner in these hard, dark places. And in our book, we find Heather in yet another really hard, dark place, getting some information that really rocks her and takes her off of her feet. And to see how Flynn responds to that and still decides to love her through it, I think is something that we can all hope to be for our significant others or our friends or our family members.
I love how you speak about relationships. And I don't want to directly quote the book, but there was a theme in the story about a person making us feel as if we are exactly where we are meant to be. And I love that. I don't want it to be misconstrued. It's not about someone being perfect. It's about that feeling of synchronicity and alignment and just that knowing of, oh, I'm not at odds with everything. And sometimes being at odds with other people, with the environment, with ourselves can be a baseline. Like that can feel really normal. If you grow up in a home where there's constant like combative energy, that can almost seem like something to gravitate towards. But you're highlighting this feeling of even when the world around us is, unpredictable, or I'm getting information, or I feel unprepared for what's going on in this relationship, I'm feeling in alignment. And so I know you just gave us a beautiful answer about that, but let's just talk about that specific feeling. And, it's in your book, but it goes even deeper than the book. Like, this is something some of us don't experience in real life. And the first time we experience it is in the pages of a book. So I want to highlight like why that feeling of alignment was so important in this story.
Yeah, yeah, that was, like I said before, it's something that is rare to not only experience, especially in young adulthood, but to read about in literature, novels, media, movies, even. It's rare to find an actual healthy relationship where Flynn is a healed version of himself. And he's on this other side of the mountain of healing because he did the work. And Heather is still kind of slowly walking up the hill. She's not at the bottom anymore. She's working, but she's in the hard part where we're huffing and puffing, trying to get through it. Flynn's waiting for her on the top. It was really important to me to show, especially a man who is healed and who is patient and kind. He's not a morally gray hero. And we love those. I love him. But Flynn is not that. Flynn is a healed version of himself. And I thought it was really important to showcase that there are men like that out there who do want the best for you, who also know what they want in a relationship, who they know what they will and will not accept in a loving, boundaried way. And I think that was really, really great to explore that with Flynn, his loving boundaries and the healed version of himself, kind of in helping to set an example of somebody who has also been through some hard things, maybe not to the same degree as Heather or the same flavor, but who's also had a lot of traumatic things in his past. An example of somebody who had the hard thing happen, grew from it, and is now helping show her that there's another way of living by loving her through it and supporting her.
And how dare you write a book where the woman doesn't do all of the emotional labor? Erinn, you are wild. No, like I'm joking, but at the same time, it's so interesting because your book is almost an invitation to take a look at that and say, oh, how often do we expect that in our relationships, in media? And what does it look like when it's not what we're told is completely socially acceptable, is that you're like leading someone along? Um, I really appreciated this part of the story. And there's a big story going on here. There's a lot of things to talk about, but I want to hone in on this one part for a moment because there were themes of self-sabotage and abandonment in this relationship. And you address them so beautifully. And I like talking about them because I think some people don't know that those two themes are so closely related in real life. Like, it happens in our work environments, right? If someone is self-sabotaging, it's because there's like a little bit of an abandonment issue going on. It happens in relationships. And when that's brought to the surface in this story, it's not done in a punitive way. It's not done in an I gotcha way. It's done in an invitation of, this is a safe relationship, so we can actually talk about this, but I'm not going to ignore it. Like, I'm not going to hide. I'll bring this to the surface because I know my intention in bringing it up, and I know you're safe with me when I bring it up, but I'm not going to not bring it up. So talk to me a little bit about what was behind sort of your motivation for touching on abandonment and self-sabotage in the story.
Yeah, it's a tough topic. It's a really tough topic. And I didn't want to alienate readers. I didn't want to make them feel called out. It's something that I feel like every person has done in their life. You know, if I block things off right here, if I guard my heart here, then nothing bad can happen to me. I can't be hurt again. And that happens all the time. I wanted Flynn to meet Heather where she was at. I wanted him to love her where she was at, but I didn't want him to enable her to stay there. I wanted him to help her become a better version of herself because she's never known support like that before. And coming from somebody who's used to being abandoned, Heather, she has no idea what any other possibility might look like. And it's jarring, and it could make you feel combative, and that's kind of what Heather goes through in this specific scene. She feels like she's on guard and that she has to defend herself, and Flynn is just coming in lovingly, and he's saying, no, we're not gonna, this is not how we handle things lovingly. You can't just keep shutting me out when things get hard. It hurts me, and I know that that's not what you're trying to do, but you're pushing me away. And this line that I wrote, he says, you're going to lose me to walls you built before you even met me. And that's a tough one to sit with.
We're just looking at each other like, I was not okay when I read that, by the way. I just want you to
Yeah,
know.
I was not okay either. Like, it's just kind of exploded out of me. Well, like, it's hard, and that's something that Heather needed to hear because, you know, it's not right how she had been treating Flynn. It's not fair to him. He's just coming in as his genuine self, loving her, wanting to be there for her, supporting her, not pushing her into doing anything that she's not ready for, just wanting to hold space for her and wanting to take, there's a line in there, wanting, he was not sad. He didn't pity her, but he was sad that Heather wouldn't let him hold any of the hurt with her. He was sad that she was taking it all by herself when he wants to come in and help her lighten the load a little bit. And it was something that I knew we needed to have because, as I said before, it's not common to see a man who's emotionally regulated in literature or media. And it was important to me to show that these men do exist. And Flynn is a great example of that.
You bring up a really interesting topic, and it's something that actually doesn't get spoken about a lot. So we're just going to do it together here the same way we did in the last episode. We went super deep and we're talking about growing up with the isms, or, in a home where there's substance use or something going on where you are not allowed to be the age that you are. And I feel like that's a very helpful definition of it. Like, even as a kid, you're not allowed to be a kid. You have to be the parentified child. But one of the sort of hallmarks of that experience that people don't mention a lot is that then throughout your life, even if you're not in that situation anymore, you confuse pity with love. And it can be very, very challenging to know what to receive, to know what to give, to know where to put your energy. And here we have this main male character saying it in the gentlest, most loving way, but really clarifying, like, I'm not sorry for you. I'm like here with you. And again, what an interesting experience for the reader, that might be the first time where they experience that of, oh no, that is the difference. Someone who wants to walk beside me, not ahead of me, not 10 steps behind me so that they don't have to deal with all the things I'm dealing with, but a true partner. And that sort of shifts me into a different topic, is that in this book, it was so interesting. The deeper their relationship got, almost like the more intimate they got. And those scenes were so important because so much was being established, even in the intimate moments. And you could see that it was so much deeper than surface level. It's like, if you're a person who feels, I'm trying to think of the right word, maybe like unsafe opening up, and someone make you, like, you really do feel safe, you're going to have a different experience with intimacy. And I really felt that in this book, where they got to know each other more, they connected more, they got through the deeper levels of the relationship, and it came through in the physicality as well. So I just want to check in with you about that and what you were thinking as you were writing those scenes, because, like, we're thinking about that they had a book one, right? And it was beautiful and it was romantic and it was all these things. And now we get to this even deeper level in book two.
Yeah, something I wanted to explore in book 2 was that Heather is taking agency of her life, and she's making these decisions because she was unable to make decisions for her life and for her direction up until this point. So something I really wanted to do was to have Flynn let her take the lead in this adventure to, and it's already established in book 1 and then also in the blurb on the back of the book. They're looking for the lost Jacobite gold. I don't know if any of our listeners are familiar with Scottish history, but just a little snippet of it. It's a bunch of gold that was supposedly taken from either Spain or France. Nobody knows for sure, and nobody actually knows if it truly does exist, to fund the Jacobite cause. So it's the Scots fighting against English rule in the 1740s, and this gold went missing. So Heather comes to find out that her ancestor is tied to this gold and to this legend. And she finds out that her mom was also hunting this, and her mom had passed away. And she decided that this is her first step in becoming who she is by looking for this gold, because she now lives in the house where her ancestral home where all of this stuff took place, and she's in her ancestral country, and she wants to make this choice for herself. And Flynn really steps into that and lets her lead and lets her make the decisions and the choices to explore that. Now in the bedroom, things are kind of different. The things are kind of different. Flynn takes more of like this soft dominant role in intimacy, and it's something that I thought was important to help Heather let her guard down. And the decision fatigue. He I don't know how I should put it. The
Oh, well, I
decision
love that you just used that phrase, decision fatigue. Let's pause there for a second. And how do you define that phrase for anyone listening who it might be the first time they've heard it and it's just like ringing a bell for them of like, I don't even know what it means, but I know what I think it means right now.
Yeah, decision fatigue is what it sounds like. You're making decisions left and right, and it could be with your job, it could be with your personal life. For me personally, I'm a mom and I'm a wife, and I stay home with my toddler, and I'm constantly making conscious and both unconscious choices all day long for my children, for my household, for other people, and it's exhausting, and you become physically and emotionally bogged down with making choices all day. So what I wanted Flynn to do is, while Heather's out here making all these big brain decisions and big choices in searching for her family's legacy, um, I wanted him to kind of come in with that safety and intimacy where she can let her guard down. She can relax, she can enjoy, she can feel loved in that way. And that's something that was really fun for me to explore. Like, Heather being kind of dominant in the search for this legacy, inversely Flynn becoming kind of the soft dominant type in their intimacy. And it really builds such a beautiful layer in their relationship, the safety and the ease and the letting go. And that was really fun to explore.
Oh, so beautifully said. And I love that you're highlighting sort of their external experience and their private internal experience. It was just so beautifully done. And I do love that you shared that term. I think everyone listening to this podcast is going to have a moment where they're like, oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm
yes, that would be
exhausted
nice.
too.
Like, yes, we are bombarded. I'm exhausted too. No, and that's why it's so fun talking about these things because, yes, you've written this beautiful story about family legacy, an internal and external journey, being in Scotland, like all of these beautiful things. But so many of the themes are deeply relatable to anyone who's listening or reading wherever they are in their life. And I think that's what connects us as readers because no, it's like, no, I'm not Heather, right? But I can relate to so many of the things that she's going through because you're being so honest about her as a character and the fact that she's on a journey and for her not having to be ashamed for being on a journey. And I feel like I kind of want to just touch on that for a second because you're allowing your characters to grow. And I feel like that's a really brave thing to do, right? Like, I'm not writing the perfect character who has it all figured out and like the sassy answer from the second I open the book. Like, this person is growing in real time on the page. She's developing skills. She's testing boundaries because a word you used earlier in the podcast was someone sharing their boundaries and establishing them and sort of maybe how we misconstrue that, right? I think we hear the word boundary and some people think it's being punched in the face and we've done something wrong. But boundaries in relationships can be about establishing and maintaining a safe connection. And maybe we don't have them day one, date one, when we meet someone. So watching these two negotiate this throughout the story was just so interesting. And there was this one phrase, it's bothering me, right? This one phrase, I have it on the screen that I'm looking at right now. And I'm like, don't forget to talk about this. Don't forget to talk about this. So I'm just going to talk about it. This just really caught me. And it was what cannot be buried must be carried. And I want to talk about that with you. Because again, this is one of those things where, yes, like visually and like almost poetically, it fits into the story. But how does this relate to all of us? Like, how can all of us read that line and take a moment to look at our own lives and our own experiences and say, oh, what am I trying to bury and what am I carrying right now?
Yeah. On the surface level, that quote is referencing gold, physical gold. Um, but as we all know, with me now, there's there's deeper meaning behind it. You know, what cannot be buried must be carried. That can relate to feelings, to emotions, to experiences. And, you know, what is your gold that you cannot bury? What is your gold that you have to carry? What is this thing that you have to bring with you throughout your journey? Is it heavy? Is it light? It's that was a good one to write. It was, and I'm so glad that you noticed it, that you like her, that you read it. I'm like, well, she gets it. Um, yeah, oh man.
I paid very close attention to your writing because I had a wild page of notes when we started this. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for noticing. Yeah, it makes you think, right? Especially coming at it, looking, you know, having the background of Heather, and then also Harris and Fiona, their ancestors. You know, their journey kind of mirrors each other. It's a dual timeline situation, and you know, seeing the background of Heather's growth and Heather's like journey forward, and then seeing Harris and Fiona's journey forward, but it also kind of bleeds into the past and they're all kind of interconnected. It mirrors that. And what else is Heather carrying? Her emotional baggage. And it kind of relates back to Harris and Fiona as well, their emotional baggage. So it just highlights that Heather comes from this long, beautiful, legacy of hurt and heartache and danger and all of these things. And it's exciting to see what she does with it and how she's shaped by it, and then the choices that she makes on the other side.
Well, let's drop a little bit deeper into that quote. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, so we can take as much time as we need with this, but I'm thinking of the reader that finds your book and also finds themselves at that intersection where they're realizing, metaphorically, like my hands are full. Like I'm carrying all of how can I open myself up to something new or something that's meant for me, because I'm holding on to all of these other things because I have not buried them. And I almost just want to invite you to talk to that person who's listening, who reads your book and sees themselves in that quote and feels like, I didn't even realize I was still holding on to all of these things and that it was almost preventing me from what could be in front of me. Can you just talk directly to them?
Absolutely. Imagine yourself, let's use gold for the example, because it's in the book. Gold is heavy. You're carrying this heavy, heavy thing. You're going to get tired. You're going to get exhausted. You have a long way to walk. You have a long way to go. You're carrying this. It's going to be a challenge. So you have a few options. Are you going to ditch some of it? Are you going to bury some of it? Or maybe we can find somebody that can help us carry it. And we can switch out gold. We can switch out the gold for feelings or emotions or adverse experiences or even good ones. Life becomes so much more manageable when you have people who are there for you to share your burdens and your joys. And finding someone to help you carry your emotions, your gold, it makes everything much more manageable. You go from trying to manage everything by yourself, the sole survivorship, into shared experience. And we are social creatures. We're not meant to do things on our own, but we tend to self sabotage and we tend to draw into ourselves when we feel like the things that we are carrying are too burdensome for other people, or they're just so yucky that we can't share them with other people. And it's a gift to give people your true self and to allow somebody who loves you to help carry these things for you.
It's such an interesting discussion because I don't know if you've had an experience like this, so I'm not putting that on you, and it's totally fine if you haven't. But just thinking about even in my own life, right? I've shared things with people, and for one person, it was like the end of the world. And for someone else, they're like, well, it's just a part of your story. Like, not to say it's not a big deal, but it's just 1% of a much bigger story. And it's just, for some reason, however it is, it just made you who you are. And it's not the end of the world. And I think that that's a really interesting experience that we get to have, but it can be so challenging to recognize it in the moment because sometimes that initial feedback where it's like, oh, that's too much, or God, what does that say about you? That's part of you. And it's like, you can feel really shamed and blamed for being a human being, for having made mistakes, for having had to learn lessons you could only learn through time and experience, right? Like, we're not born with this knowledge. And how in a different relationship or different scenario, it can not be perceived that way. I just think that that's really interesting. And unfortunately, I did not learn that until I was much later in life. I felt like when I was a younger person, those reactions were so huge. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I'm wrong. Like, there's something wrong with me versus, oh, this is just a part of a journey. Like, you're allowed to have these experiences and you don't have to be perfect in order to give and receive that support. Like, sometimes the thing about you that you most want to hide is the thing that will connect you with the right people. And like, I think about the most important relationships in my life today, and I don't know if you feel this way, and you definitely don't have to agree with me, but it's so interesting. For most of them, it's the things that I would never want to tell anyone else are very present in the relationship. There's a lot of transparency, and I'm received in my wholeness. And I really felt like there was that theme in both of these books, but especially this one about being received in your wholeness, like not having to discard the part of yourself that you don't think is like super cute or like Instagram perfect. It's just you're the full package. I don't even know what I'm really trying to say.
No, that's
So I'm just
great.
going to be
I
honest with you.
absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And if we're being completely transparent here, it's something that I have learned recently, that I've learned shamefully recently. And it's something that you continue to learn throughout your existence. It's not like you learn how to ride a bike and you know how to do it forever. It's you change at every stage of your life. It's something that you continually have to flex and get better at, and it's not easy. And I am blessed to my best friend. She's one of my people, and my husband, he's one of my people. And realizing that if I have like two good people, if I have a few good people who love me in my wholeness and who are there for me wholeheartedly, then that's enough. I don't need to have all of the friends in the world. I don't need to be beloved by everybody. I need to love myself first and foremost, and then having my small group of people who truly cares for me and wants to be with me on my journey and wants to carry some of my gold, and I'll help carry theirs as well when it gets too
Yeah.
heavy. It's reciprocal, and
Mm-hmm.
quality over quantity, right? I have, my few good people who go to the end of the world with me and I them. And that's something that's so beautiful. And I hope and pray for all of, these listeners out there and all of my readers, that if that's not something you have right now, or maybe perhaps it is and you just don't know it yet, life is so much easier when it's not soul survivalship. Life is never easy.
Mm.
But when you take the soul survivorship out of it and when you invite people into your life, and that's a really hard thing to do because you have to have a measure of vulnerability for it. When you invite people into your sphere and you show them the holistic view of you, the things that you're not so proud about, the things that you are proud about, everything that makes you you, it's freeing.
I love that we're talking about this because like I had so many thoughts after I read the first book. And I was thinking about that attachment to perfectionism as a way to maintain relationships and how your book was just this really beautiful release from that. Even as we're thinking about how Heather and Flynn initially meet, and it's brought up again in this book, right? She's a mess when they like physically a mess when they meet because she's like in a rainstorm, it's muddy, it's crazy. And that's basically someone's version of hell who spent their entire life trying to be so perfect, quiet, hug the wall to not, bring attention to themselves. And wouldn't you know, that set her up for the exact perfect, beautiful relationship where she didn't have to be perfect. And it's just so beautifully written. And there were so many things in this book. Right. We're going to finish this recording today. And I know I'm going to look back at all of my notes, but we didn't even talk about half the things I wanted to talk about. But I do feel like we were able to really drop in. And I want to give you a moment to just hand the floor over to you to speak directly to the listener who picks up this book. What is something that you want them to walk away with?
That's a really good question. I'd like the reader who picks up this book to be able to walk away with the reality that you have agency and the ability to choose things for yourself, and you're able to leave situations that no longer suit you, and you're able to make these choices. And they may seem scary and it may seem hard for you to make these choices, and there may be some really hard things that happen along the way of you becoming this better, more healed version of yourself. And I think that we undergo the most growth and the most positive change in our lives when we hold that tension of being uncomfortable. Think of it like a bow and arrow. You're holding the tension, and then you let it go, and hopefully you're at your target. You're aiming. It's important to feel stretched as you're growing, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It usually means you're doing something right. So that's something that I feel like is really important to internalize and to know. Just because something may not feel perfect and it may not feel comfortable, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong.
Oh, Erinn, thank you so much. That was so beautiful. And I know I put you on the spot with that, but as someone who really truly enjoyed this book, I love hearing that. And I know this episode in this book is going to find the right person at the exact right moment. And I'm really excited for that. And I'm just so glad that you're in this space and writing these stories because I think that they're very much needed. And I'm excited to see what comes for you. So, can you remind us again the name and when and where it will be available?
Absolutely. So this is the sequel. It is book 2 in the Glennoran series. So book 1 is of Heather and Thistle by me, Erinn Maxwell. And book 2 comes out on May 1st, 2026. It's called Of Fate and Fortune by me, Erinn. And you can find it anywhere online where books are sold. If you're local to the Sacramento area, I do have a indie bookstore partner. It's located inside Capitol Books on K Street. It's an all romance shop called Naughty Novels. Naughty is spelled with a K, Knotty. And they're great.
Erinn did write us another love letter, and I want to give her the floor to share it with all of us. So, Erinn, the floor is yours.
To my readers, you'd think this story is all about finding buried treasure. The title says it all, right? Of fate and fortune. I mean, it is, just not in the way you'd expect. Because the real shift doesn't happen when we uncover the past. It happens when we realize we don't have to let it decide everything for us. And that's the part that matters. The moment you go, oh, I actually get a say in this. It's terrifying, but also freeing. There's love here too, don't worry. But it's the kind that meets you in the middle of the mess, not after everything is neatly figured out and tied up in a bow, which honestly, to me, is the only kind worth having. So if you're in a season where things feel uncertain or like you're outgrowing pieces of your life, good. That usually means something better is about to take shape. With love, Erinn.
Oh, Erinn, thank you so much for spending time with us. I really enjoyed the book, and all of this information will be in the show notes. And if you're interested in following Erinn, I'll make sure that all of her social links are in the show notes as well. So thank you again for joining us. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.